Good morning, boys and girls. It's week 3 and Tuesday, and it's time for our first grammar lesson for the week. This week, we are going to be learning about how to use quotation marks in narrative writing. So what are quotation marks? Quotation marks, which are also known as speech marks, are a form of punctuation. They are commonly used in narrative texts. Quotation marks are used to show when someone is speaking. Quotation marks look like this. Can you see you've got 66s at the beginning and 99s at the end? Quotation marks are used by writers to show which words are being spoken by a character rather than the narrator. This is called direct speech. Sentences which include direct speech contain words spoken by the character and the words spoken by the narrator. Quotation marks go around the actual words a person speaks. Quotation marks go before the first word that is spoken and after the last word that is spoken. In this example, can you see the word? You can see Mum saying, "Go to bed." The 66 go before the go and the 99 goes after the word bed. "Can I have a drink, please?" Kate asked. Can you see the 66 go at the front before the word can and the 99s go after the word please? So I'm going to show you some examples of writing direct speech. Some sentences contain direct speech at the beginning with the words of the narrator, followed by the words of the character. Have a look. The boy detective said, "It's time to look for clues." So the narrator's telling us who's speaking, but the character is saying, "It's time to look for clues." Sometimes sentences containing direct speech begin with the words from the character, followed by the words of narrator. "It's time to look for clues," the boy detective said. This time we've got what the character said first, and then the narrator's telling us who said it. Alright, boys and girls, at the beginning of the lesson I said you needed a piece of paper or a copy of the worksheet because we're going to do this next writing task together. In each sentence I'm going to show you, you need to put in the speech marks or the quotation marks. So here's our first sentence. "Mum, I can see Superman," exclaimed Michael. Now, looking at that sentence, what did Michael actually say? That's the bit you're going to put in between your 66 and 99s. So if you're working on the worksheet, it's very easy. You can just pop in. Or if not, you might want to pause the videos to copy the sentences down. All right, next sentence. Mum replied, "Are you sure, Michael?" All right, once again, what words did Mum say? Put the 66 before the first word and the 99s after the last word. Next one. "I'm totally sure that it's Superman," said Michael. All right. What's the narrator's telling us it's Michael, but what did Michael actually say? 66s before the first word and 99s after the last word he said. "Superman looks a lot like your dad," Mum said. Now the narrator's told us it's Mum speaking, so what did Mum actually say? Put the 66 at the first word and the 99s after the last word. Michael asked, "Has he been in my dress-up box again?" So what was the words that Michael said? Put the 66 before the first word and the 99s after the last word. I think that maybe he has, said Mum. So in this case, what words were said by Mum? Put the 66 in front of the first word and the 99s after the last word. All right. So now let's see how you went. So let's see how you did. Boys and girls, if you make a mistake, that's fine, but can you put the put corrections in so you've got something to refer back to? On our first sentence, Mum, I can see Superman, exclaimed Michael. Now the word exclaimed is just another word I could have used for said. So I've got the first word he said was Mum, so I'm putting my 66s there. Now notice it ended with an exclamation mark and I put my quotation marks after the punctuation marks, so it goes there. Mum replied, Are you sure, Michael? So what was the first word that Mum said is so the 66s go there, and the last word was Michael. Once again, notice how I'm including the question marks. I'm putting my exclamation marks after that question mark. I'm totally sure that it's Superman, said Michael. So the first word was I, the last one was Superman, but we're also including that exclamation mark. Superman looks a lot like your dad, said Mum. So the first word was Superman, she said. This time we're ending with a comma, but the exclamation marks go after the comma. Michael asked, Has he been in my dress-up box again? The first word was has, the last word was again, but we're going to include that question mark. I think that maybe he has, said Mum. Once again, the first word was I, and the last one was has, but we're including the exclamation mark. You should now understand why quotation marks are used and where they should be placed in a sentence containing direct speech. However, quotation marks are not the only punctuation marks used in a sentence containing direct speech. You also need to know when and where to use a comma, question marks, exclamation marks, and full stops. And I was kind of hinting that to you on our last task. So here's rule number 1. There is always a punctuation mark at the end of direct speech. It's like ending a sentence before closing the quotation marks. Now this could be a full stop, a comma, a question mark, or an exclamation mark. Have you ever seen such a hideous witch? Asked Tim. Can you notice the quotation marks go at the first word that Tim said, and as I was pointing out before, it goes after the question marks. But the end of the sentence isn't there. You still have to put a full stop after the word asked. That was the part that was spoken by the narrator. I don't think she's hideous, Jeremy replied. Now in this case, I'm putting a comma there. So that's the end of what Jeremy's saying, but then the narrator's telling us who's saying it. So there still has to be a full stop at the end here. Oh, but she is. She's awful, Tim argued. Now, can you see in this sentence, he actually had 2 exclamation marks, and that was contained in our speech marks, but the narrator's telling us Tim argued it, and you've got to put the full stop after that to complete the whole sentence. Jeremy replied, I suppose you're right. Now here you've got a comma after the word replied because that part, Jeremy replied, that bit was being said by the narrator, but the character said, I suppose you're right, and it has a full stop. There is always a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence, and we know that. Remember, a sentence contains both direct speech and narration. So part of it's going to be what's being said by the character, and part of it's going to be what is the narrator telling us who's speaking. Sometimes the direct speech will be at the end of the sentence. Other times the narration will be at the end of the sentence. So here's what I'm talking about. I'll show you. In this sentence, what a majestic lion. Now that's being said by the character. And we know that because now the narrator's saying, Lizzie exclaimed. The Lizzie exclaims being said by the narrator. So it has to have a full stop after it. In this sentence, you've got Leo huffed. Now that's been spoken by the narrator. Now I'm only going to put a comma here because now we're going to finish the sentence of finding out what Leo said. And he said, majestic? I think not. Lizzie asked, once again, that's starting by the narrators telling us that Lizzie's asking it. And what did she say? The character's saying, how would you describe him? See how it's like a sentence within a sentence? All right, so here's our last rule. There is always a comma following the saying verb if the narration comes before the direct speech. So that means the narrator's telling us which character is about to do the talking. Have a look, I'll show you. In this case, the narrator is saying, Karen said, so I'm putting a comma there. And what did Karen say? Well, that's her sentence there. The water is really refreshing. The narrator's telling us that Toby replied, so I'm putting a comma, but what did Toby say? Here's Toby's sentence. I might jump in when I warm up. Once again, the narrator's telling us what Karen called out. She said, come in now, it's lovely. The narrator's saying that Toby said, I will come in when I'm ready. Can you see we've put the commas after the words said, replied, called, and said. They are our saying verbs. All right, boys and girls, now we're going to try and put this all together. So now we're going to do the bottom part of your worksheet. Now remember, each sentence that has direct speech in generally has a sentence within each in a sentence, because what is being said by the character has its own sentence and will have its own punctuation marks. We have to then look at which side of the direct speech is the narrator giving us information. If it's before the direct speech, we're going to put a comma after what the narrator says. If it's not, we're just going to probably end our sentence with a full stop. So let's go through each activity, each sentence together, and we'll work it out. In this sentence, happy birthday! Anne's friends called out as they jumped out behind the furniture. Right, in this sentence, the narrator's telling us that it's Anne's friends who are calling out. But the narrator's also given us a little bit more information, telling us what they were doing as they called it out. So, what did the friends call out? Did you get happy birthday? Yes. Now, if they're yelling out happy birthday, they're probably shouting it. So I would end with an exclamation mark. So that's what I'm going to put my 66 in front of the happy and my 99s after my exclamation after birthday. Then it's just a complete sentence and I'm going to finish it with a full stop. All right, let's do the next one. What's everyone doing here? Anne asked in a confused voice. So there's two clues there. I've got the word asked and I've got what. Now I know what is a question starter. Now the narrator's telling us that Anne asked. What was the question she asked? She said, what is everyone doing here? So that's her sentence. What's she going to end her sentence with? a full stop, an exclamation mark, or a question mark. And then, because that's what Anne said, that's where I'm going to put my 66s and my 99s to enclose what she said. The second part is just said by the narrator, and I'm just going to end with a full stop. We're celebrating your birthday, David replied. Okay, can you do this one by yourself? The narrator's telling us that David said something. What did David say? And what goes after what the narrator said? Okay, next one. Kate said, oh, now, here, the narrator's talking at the beginning. And at the end of the sentence, it's saying what Kate said. So think about that third rule. Kate said, did you think we'd forgotten your birthday? Is Kate asking a question or what she's saying? Is she going to end what Kate said with a question mark, a full stop, or an exclamation mark? What a wonderful surprise, Kate said. Once again, the narrator's at the end. What did Anne say? Put your speech marks around that. So let's see how you did. Once again, boys and girls, if you made a mistake, that's okay, but can I ask you to go and correct and put in the correct punctuation so you've got something to look back to refer to. Our first one, happy birthday, Anne's friends called out as they jumped out behind the furniture. Well, the narrator is telling it it's Anne's friends said it. What did they say? They said happy birthday. So that's why I put an exclamation mark, because I think they're probably shouting that out. And then the rest is just all the information that the narrator is giving us, and I'm going to end with a full stop. What's everyone doing here? Anne asked in a confused voice. Now remember, there was two hints there, what and ask. So I knew that this was a question. So I knew Anne was going to end, what Anne said was going to end in a question mark. Her first word she said was what, and the last one she said was here. The rest is just said by the narrator, and I can end it with a full stop. We're celebrating your birthday, replied David. Now this one, instead of having a full stop there, I can just put a comma, because I don't want to end the sentence after birthday. So instead of putting a full stop, I'm going to put a comma, and then after what the narrator said, I'm going to put a full stop after that. Kate said, now here, this is the first time we've got the narrator saying it at the beginning. So remember our third rule, when the narrator's at the beginning, you've got to put a comma after the saying verb. In this case, it said. Did you think we'd forgotten your birthday? Now I know that's a question. And I'm going to enclose that in my 66 and 99s. What a wonderful surprise. Now, you might have added that with an exclamation mark, but I just put, instead of putting a full stop, because I didn't want to end the sentence, I just used a comma. And then after the narrator, I just put a full stop there. Well, how'd you go? Now, I know it can be a little bit confusing, so we'll have lots of practice when we get back to school, and I'll be there to help you. So that's the end of our lesson for today, boys and girls. So turn off the video and turn it on for Thursday for our next grammar lesson. Welcome back. It's Thursday, and now we're going to use what we learnt on Tuesday and use it in our sentence of the day sentences. So let's just review what we learnt. Have a look at these two characters. Now I'm going to put in speech bubbles what they're saying to each other. I love writing stories. Melissa replies, reading stories is more fun. Now, if I was going to put that into sentences, this is how I do it. I love writing stories. Now, that's what Ryan said, but the narrator is telling us, because we don't have a picture, the narrator is saying, Ryan said happily. Melissa then replied. Once again, the narrator is telling us who said it, and she said, reading stories is more fun. And you see, because the narrator said something first, we had to put a comma, and then we have a full stop after what Melissa said. So here's our writing task today. You're going to choose two of the characters I've got down below and write a conversation between the two characters where the characters speak at least twice. Did you notice before on the other examples, every time a new character spoke, I took a new line. So you're going to write 4 sentences, each on a different line. Now, you're going to be the narrator, so you're going to be telling the reader who's speaking. Whether it's the fierce lion, maybe it's the kind witch, the Girl Scout, the fierce warrior, or the boy with the broken arm. Maybe you might have given him a name. Is his name David, perhaps? Your choice. You're the author. Anyway, what you're going to do is you're going to write the sentences. You've got to decide whether you, as the narrator, are you going to say, for example, the kind witch said, how did you break your arm? Then you might say, the boy said, I fell off my bike. Now, in both those examples, I've had the narrator telling you who the character was first. So after the word said, I would have to put a comma. Now, this is why I wanted you to go back and keep your worksheet from Tuesday, because you can have a look at the examples on there or the earlier examples in this video. All right, well, that's your lesson for today. You'll just complete your task, write your sentences, and as always, once you've finished, so now you've finished your work, now you're going to do the 5-tick checklist. But we're going to add a little bit more to it because you're doing a lot more punctuation today. So once again, did you start your sentences with capital letters? And that includes what goes in speech marks, because remember, when we're doing direct speech, you have a sentence within a sentence. Did you finish all of your sentences with a full stop? Well, probably you didn't. Did you add full stops, question marks, or exclamation marks? And did you put in your quotation marks and commas in the right spot? Did you leave finger spaces between your words and write neatly on the lines? Were there any spelling words you're not sure of? Just put a circle around them and maybe ask someone to help you with them. And lastly, read your sentence to someone else. Do they make sense? Once you're happy with your work, boys and girls, get someone to take a photo of it and upload it into the week 3 completed work document.